the man with an opinion on all things sports. This is The Meltdown with Vince Thompson.
Welcome back to this week's Meltdown. I'm Vince Thompson, founder, chairman, CEO of Melt, with my partner in crime, Jake Crane of the J-Boy Show. And this week's special Meltdown, we're going to break the real madness down of March Madness. And trust me, there's been plenty to talk about in March Madness in the world of sports business. And before we get started, you can follow me on social media at Vinny Inc. You hit me in at LinkedIn. Jake, how can they follow you?
You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at The J-Boy Show. Our new YouTube channel is doing really well. It's The J-Boy Show, THE space, JBOY space, SHOW.
And we've got the J-Boy Bracket Challenge going on, and Vinny Inc. is rising in the polls and being bullish on some of his picks. This is our 19th Final Four to activate around. You may have seen some of the things with Aflac. We're very, very proud of that. So we're going to dive right into it today, Jake. We're going to the real madness of March, the Ides of March, the bubble in Indy and the bubble in San Antonio. What's this craziness going on with the men's and women's disparity? The women's aren't able to use the March Madness breakdown. NCAA leadership, is that an oxymoron in terms? We're going to talk about that big old Taj Mahal in India. I spent a lot of quality and unquality time in that. Hashtag not NCAA property. By the way, this is not going to be a bash NCAA, but I've been doing business with them for 21 years now. Know them well. I know there's a lot of institutional arrogance there. Running a multi-billion-dollar organization with people who really have not truly run businesses as part of it. 10 ears, tone deaf. We're going to talk about, Georgia Tech coach calling them out. The wagering, every day we pick up, these massive numbers behind the wagering. And then we're actually maybe unpack a little bit of basketball, but there's some very true business and social issues. I've been very, very involved with the NCAA and March Madness and the Final Four. As I said, this is my 19th with the Coca-Cola Company as well as Aflac. I know them well. I created the entertainment strategy for the Final Four back in 2003 and with the Coca-Cola Company. So again, and I got some good friends. There's some good people there. But it's moving really, really fast. The current is, right up under them, sweeping them away. So we're going to see what happens. But, Jake, being a former student athlete and being a former coach, and you actually played in a quote unquote non-revenue sport as to educate our audience, revenue sports, typically 80%, 90% of an athletic department's budget is in college football. Maybe 10 to 20% on a good day if it's or a blue blood, maybe a little bit more from men's basketball. But all the quote-unquote non-revenue sports, one is women's basketball. But in this day and age, with Title IX, with all of these issues swirling around with NIL, why now? Particularly you being a student athlete and by the way, it reminds me of that vignette. You had one job.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So as a coach or student athlete, what lens are you viewing this? So we've got some images here. I mean, when I first saw that image of that dumbbell rack, I was like, really, this is like a joke, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, I've produced tons of events in Indy and tons in San Antonio. And I will tell you this, no two markets from a volunteer and a corporate infrastructure, meeting, event production, no two markets do it better than San Antonio and Indy. So let's drill to the bottom of this because, I mean, if you're the NCAA, you got to be embarrassed.
Yeah. Well, the way I look at it, and again, you said it, there's some good people that work in the NCAA, but in reality, what the NCAA is a monopoly and the middleman. That's what they are when you really look at it. And coaching and playing, as a player, when I was playing, this name, image, and likeness stuff really wasn't, nobody talked about it. But students are smart enough now, and they're starting to realize the business side of it. Because, I always use the example, at Auburn with Cam Newton, nobody knows how much money the number 2 jersey sold in Auburn and bookstores and stuff like that. And they didn't say,
I do.
Yeah, you
millions.
do. Yeah, and they didn't
still
say
does,
Newton,
by the way,
without a doubt. And they didn't say Newton on the back of the jersey, but everybody bought that because it was number 2.
They still buy Bose.
100%. And Tim Tebow too at Florida. You look at some of that, and they've gotten smarter. Now, as a coach, you always just wanted nothing to do with the NCAA. As long as you weren't talking to the NCAA, the compliance guy walks down the hallway and it's like a bunch of rats jumping off a ship. Everybody shuts their office door because that's something you don't want to put yourself into. And typically, if you're talking to that guy, it's not good. So something happened. Now, there's some guys that have a really good relationship that come down there and just want to talk ball and stuff like that, but most don't. But when you talk about the women's tournament, and look, women's basketball does not make money. We know that. But when you make something like the NCAA tournament, when this is the championship, this something, the epitome, the pinnacle, whatever you want to call it, of basketball for women, and you have one dumbbell rack, and then you say it's because you don't have space, and you have half a ballroom that's painting around. The problem with the NCAA is they're so bullish and they're so stubborn that they get in their own way. They think they're so powerful.
I think you would define that as arrogance.
Arrogance, that's what it is. It's arrogance. But what they're finding out now is, without the student athlete, it's a house of cards. Because they
have nowhere to hide.
They have nowhere to hide. There's nobody in the NCAA that's working that office that's running a 4-4 or can run by a safety at Alabama or can hit 45% of their threes in SEC play. They can't do that. And what they're starting to figure out is once the employee or the student athlete realizes their value, it has pigeonholed the NCAA into either evolving to giving some of that money back. Because you say it's a Taj Mahal in Indy. They're not hurting for money. They've got penny lawyers they can play.
We're going to get into that in a minute.
But at the end of the day, like you said, it's arrogance. And from the student athlete's view and from the coach's view and me looking back on it, good for the students, because how can I sit here and say, I want the J-Boy show, my name, image, and likeness, I want to get paid for it, but yet a student athlete who does something that probably 0.02% of people in this country or on the planet can do isn't getting paid.
Well, there's several interesting things you brought up, but my first beef was, why didn't they just be honest? Like, hey, we messed up.
They did.
Secondly, you had these amazing organizations, Dick's, Orange Theory, saying, Champs, Foot Locker, hey, we got the trucks loaded, we'll bring you some equipment in. Nah, you can't do that because you're not a sponsor. Now, was that a selling strategy or a tone-deaf strategy? Now, by the way, I represent NCAA sponsors in full transparency, and they pay a lot of money for that right. Mm-hmm. But there could have been, all right, look, bring us equipment tomorrow, and we'll figure out the rest later. Because these are student athletes performing at the highest level, amazing championship play, last night with the women's and all that. And so, and again, to your point, it's this lens or this tunnel vision. And again, I don't even know. It's beyond arrogance.
Yeah.
So, but let's talk about because I think people really need to understand. Look, and I've been in meetings with President Emmert. I'm sure he's a great guy. He's a university president, but so why would that qualify him to run $1 billion business?
It doesn't. To me, it's the good old boy network. I mean, when I look at it. The part that I don't understand, Vince, is that you have all this money. How are you not better at PR? How are you not better at PR? Who is, and again, Mark Emmert's at the head of this. To me, it's like somebody spilled Kool-Aid on the kitchen floor, and instead of taking the Swiffer that you have and cleaning it up quickly, you're going to let it sit there because you're not sponsored by Swiffer. And the NCAA, to me, is the king that's sitting in his castle, that his army's getting overrun, and he doesn't want to do anything about it because he's used to getting his way. And what they're going to find out is that they are doing nothing but compounding their problems through what you say arrogance, and I agree with you, it's past arrogance. But again, I will say they are the middleman. And what is going to happen, and it's already happening in my opinion, is these Power 5 schools say, wait a minute, our teams are generating all this money, and we're having to take a cut and give it to the NCAA.
Right.
Eventually, the middleman's going to get eliminated, especially if the middleman makes stupid decisions in today's society as well.
You've got that decision-making. You've also, and we keep saying this. I mean, maybe their business model's outdated. Maybe Cable television's business model is outdated. Maybe third-tier media rights side. We say there's going to be a seismic shift. Mark Emmert, so people understand, gets paid $3.5 million, and I want to know where the line is for that job. And basically, it is a pass-through organization. Turner and CBS write them a check through 2032 for $1 billion a year.
Yep.
They take a rake on the $1.5 billion, so let's say it's 1.5 to 3% for all these administrative costs and these fancy salaries and all these kind of things to supposedly adjudicate the game. They don't adjudicate college football except on the enforcement side. It's selective enforcement. We've seen it. We see it going on with LSU and Kansas and Arizona and with the Blue Bloods and even down into North Carolina and all of that. So it's and then he says, all right, well we may have been a little oversight in San Antonio. No, big oversight. And then he says, well, I think I'm going to sit down and meet with the kids after it. I mean, it's just one mistake after the other. And again, these are intelligent people. He's got a PhD. Not sure what that means. I don't know what it would mean in Lower Alabama to me and you, but just wow. Like, why do they need this building?
To me, it's a great question, and nobody's really up until now asked that. Another problem they have, Vince, is there's no representation for the athletes. There's no when they're making all these rules and all these decisions, there is not one person in that room that represents athletes. And what does that give you? It gives you an echo chamber, Vince, and that's where the worst stuff comes out of an echo chamber because, again, it's been monopolistic, and they've just positioned themselves, well, to get to the players or to get to the coaches or to get to the university, you have to go through us. And all of a sudden, when you realize that your model's outdated or that you're no longer needed, and then you refuse to evolve, that's when the house of cards starts falling down. And it's a matter of time because, again, we always talk about taxation without representation. It's one of the reasons why everybody came over here. There is nobody that represents the student athletes, and they're smart enough to start figuring that out and realize that, hey, without us, there is no games. How can a kid on a music scholarship be able to go and sell a mixtape and make money off that hand over fist, but Javon Quinterly can't start a Jelly Fam thing that takes off, and that's something he came up with and get paid for it. It's the biggest hypocrisy, and these are the same people that and there's nothing wrong with having a PhD. There's a lot of people with PhDs that are very smart, whatever. But it's, to me, it's the people that make their moves in the ivory tower, and they can't see the ocean through the trees, and eventually those trees get cut down, and you better not be in the top of them.
Well, here's another thing that people don't think about, and we from a business perspective. So, in a normal Final Four year, March Madness, there's the round of 64, and they play those in cities, and they usually play them in 20,000-seat arenas, but that's a multi-million-dollar economic impact that those kids are driving. Yep. Parking, concessions, Coke, hotels, transportation, restaurants, airports, rental cars. Then they make it into the round of 16. That replicate that business model over again. And then when you get to the Final Four, which these cities bid on, but what a lot of people don't understand is that Indianapolis, because the NCAA used to be headquartered in Kansas City, the Indianapolis made a bid to move their corporate headquarters there, built them this fancy building. In exchange for that, they get a guaranteed Final Four every 4 to 5 years. They're in a rotation. And then it would have been in Atlanta last year. That economic impact is north of $100 to $200 million. When you think about, fortunately, I've been able to get good tickets to the Final Four, but some people pay $1,000, and they're literally they could be in Chattanooga with binoculars watching it in the dorm. So people don't really understand that we hear this $1 billion a year, but it literally is multi-billion dollars when it's played in a normal pre or post COVID environment. And again, and then the kids are getting beanie weenies and a towel and a backpack, and because it's got to be under $500 because we don't want to violate the value when if you're in the Oscars you get it's like $500,000 in your swag bag and all this kind of stuff. So it is going to be, like I said, we've been hard on them, but nobody woke up with these issues last night. Yeah. we've all been very aware of these for a while. And I'm going to tell you, it's going to impact every conversation going forward, particularly as it relates to the corporate sponsors. And because they don't like it any more than you and I do. I promise you that.
I agree.
And it's going to be interesting to see where that pushback comes. But again, I'm still mystified why anybody would need a building this fancy. And I've spent a lot of time in there, sometimes pleasant, sometimes not. Hashtag not NCAA property. It's interesting to, we've said this math over and over and over again. 64 teams, an average of 10 player per team, with $1 billion payout, $1.5 million per player. In the scenario I just laid out, it's probably $3 to $5 million per player. And to these guys, benefit. And obviously, the head coach of Michigan was in the Fab Five.
Yeah.
If anybody understands this as well as he does, so it's Juwan. So this is coming. I mean,
yeah.
but I want you to put it through the lens of a student athlete or a coach. If you were coaching now, what would that mean if you were recruiting players? I mean, how would that impact your process?
Well, to me, everybody always complains about cheating. And, there's stuff that goes on. But to me, when you're able to do that, I think it's going to cut some of that out, because now it's legal money. Now, there'll always be nefarious stuff that goes on, but it's just like I go back to the prohibition. People, even though alcohol was illegal, they would, pay double, triple what you would normally pay to get it. All of a sudden, they legalize it, and it's not cool to bootleg anymore. The only thing that came out of that was NASCAR. So
Right.
When I look at it like this, it gives you an opportunity, and to me, it helps the university, because you can take some of that money. You already look at what some of the schools are doing, having branding classes now, being able to create your own shoe with your own logo. We had Terrence Love on, a 4-star in the 2023 class of safety, that said he is going to change his major from what he thought he wanted to do to marketing and branding, because he wants to be able to be a businessman for himself. And like I said, the students and the parents are smartening up. But to me, I think it cuts some of the red tape out. Now you no longer have a problem of, the NCAA president was the chancellor of this school, so you can forget that school getting in trouble. There's no more pairing of it. You still can have an really the only thing the NCAA does to me, other than being a middleman and cutting all these deals, is enforcement. But even the way they enforce is unbelievably diagonal. It's not congruent. It's not
Selective.
even across the board. They need to have an enforcement team that is put together that has nothing to do with any of the universities that is going against. If you have any affiliation to a school that's being investigated, you have to use, what is that word? Recuse yourself. That's what you have to do, because it's not even. It is a monopoly. The people that pay the bills get the benefit of the doubt.
I think the free market is going to govern a lot of this, but here's another hidden value that we didn't talk about with the students. Oral Roberts is going to get millions of dollars of free recruiting, messaging, and branding for academic and athletics. And a lot of people like, Oral Roberts, what is that? And I grew up with, there is an Oral Roberts, and it's a Christian university in Oklahoma and all that. But those kids, unsung kids, are generating millions of dollars of advertising and awareness. And I think, like I said, we're going to continue to unpack these issues: the name, image, and likeness, these egregious coaches buyouts.
Yeah.
I mean, that we clearly know there's a lot of legacy problems. I mean, the Les Miles thing and all these fans. Why do you need a search firm if you're not going to do your job?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, Les, you were, hitting on cheerleaders in 2013. Surely somebody knew that. And the Oregon State president, who was the president of LSU at the time, has now been collateral damage out of that, right?
Yeah.
And again, there's so much positive sunlight, coming into our industries, and even and I love Nell Fortner, and she won a gold medal and has been an icon. I am so proud that leaders like her are now having the courage to come out without impunity and talk about it. And I say this all along, You wait till LeBron and Jay-Z and these guys really get a hold of this. Mm-hmm. They've got the resources, they've got the reach, they've got the financial, resources as well. And Georgia Tech is climbing up the ladder, but yet, she called it out. And I mean, as a student athlete, nothing endears you better to your coach than going to war on the front lines for your players, right?
Oh, without a doubt. And again, as a coach, the good ones at least, you understand that without the players, there is no you, because most coaches were players. And, we had J.J. Frazier on the show this past week, and something he said that I thought resonates in this conversation is that one of the reasons he signed with Georgia was because he thought that Mark Fox cared about him more than being the basketball player. Mm-hmm. And even though he's done at Georgia, they talk all the time as friends, and these relationships that you form with these coaches because you're around them all the time, and you make the decision that for the next 40 years, 5 years, whatever it is, I trust this person to help me get to the next level. And as a player and as a coach, it's such a symbiotic relationship. And when you're on the same page and you're fighting for your players, every coach that is worth their salt, I'd be shocked if one didn't, is going to fight for the benefit of their players. And they're smart enough to see it. That helps not only in recruiting, and you don't do it just to help in recruiting. You do it because how could I ask my guys to run into another grown man full speed over and over again for 5 years if they didn't trust me or thought I had their best interests? And at the end of the day, that's the difference in guys that are going to go out there and fight their guts out. And, you can lay down and bleed a while, but you're going to get up and go to war again. That's the difference in the teams that win and the coaches that stay, because it's not just about how fast you can throw a baseball, how good you can catch a football. That's a human being in that body, and there's a lot more that goes into it, and they're smart enough to see it and smart enough to embrace it because they care about the player.
Well, obviously, Nick was a defensive back. Dabo was a walk-on wide receiver at Alabama. And I honestly think that was one thing that was a challenge for Gus at Auburn, is that he wasn't as relatable to these kids. And I think you're going to see a new generation of these coaches that are going to get hired are former student athletes, and they have that innate understanding of being in that student athlete's shoes.
Yeah, without a doubt. And again, you can tell when somebody, I'm not accusing anybody of this, but you can tell when somebody is faking it or forcing it. And I always used to laugh in recruiting. I always used to think the coaches that thought they were going to go in there and fool a high school kid, that's the hardest guy to fool there is. All they do is see fake people walking up and down. We all went to high school. You understand how that goes. And you're not going to trick those kids. And the coaches that try and trick them, because what are you going to do? You're going to act one way, and then all of a sudden they get to campus and you're a totally different person, and you think you're going to get anything out of that kid or that kid's going to trust you. There's an old saying, when you recruit, you take on the kid's personality a little bit, but when they get to campus, they take on your team's culture, and that's the way that it should work. And for coaches that try and fake it, there is no faking it until you make it in coaching. That may be something that works in some professions, but if you're going to go out there and recruit, and especially if you're going to recruit a kid from a socioeconomic background that isn't great, who may not trust a lot of males, you've got to go in there and be yourself. And that's the difference at the end of the day when you're in a fist fight for a top player, is who's the guy that at the end of the day, if you break both your legs in a car crash, is going to be there for you, is going to keep your scholarship, is going to help you get a job when you get done. Right. Because that's how you go back and get the little brother.
You brought up an interesting point. You got these multimillionaires sitting in these living rooms talking to these families that may not have $500 to $1,000 in household income coming in that week.
Yeah.
I never thought about it like that. But then let's take it one step further as it relates to the absurdity of the NCAA. They won't even allow the universities to the parents that can't afford to come to these games to pay their way.
Yeah.
Now, in no mind, form, fashion whatsoever, does that make sense? And that impacts a player's performance if mama's not in the stands, right?
Oh, without a doubt. At the end of the day, why? Nobody's been able to explain to me why. And if you ask anybody at the NCAA, they can't explain it either, because there is no good answer. Because when you've been the big bad wolf for so long, and you go around the neighborhood huffing and puffing and blowing down everybody's house, eventually people get pissed off enough that they're going to guard their house. And that's what you're seeing. That's why you see the NCAA.
Bingo.
Yeah, it's like one army in the middle, and they're getting circled by just 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different armies that are, at the end of the day, bigger than them. And they're either, and this is the truth, they're either going to have to evolve or it's a wrap. Because schools are going to get smart enough, and not the smaller ones right now, but watch out for the FCS playing in the spring.
What about HBCU too?
That's exactly right. But at the end of the day, if they do not evolve, they will die. The question is, are you stubborn enough to not evolve? Are you smart enough to understand, hey, I kind of feel like, Jack from Titanic floating on the raft right now, and I can't get a spot on it.
Hey, here's the thing. Nobody's been fired yet at the NCAA.
No, they do the firing, Vince.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's been fired. Like we live in a performance-based world. Mm-hmm. I promise you, had I been coordinating that effort in San Antonio, they would have blasted me that day.
Yeah,
I would have been the sacrificial lamb. Speaking of economic impact, the players, March Madness behind Super Bowl is the highest wagered sporting event in North America. It is the highest watched sporting event. And prior to COVID, if you really wanted to observe something special, it's be in Vegas that first weekend of March Madness. Mm-hmm. Billions of dollars bet. Student athletes don't get a penny of it, and all the big boys are rushing in. Penn National, BetMGM, Caesars, Bally's, FanDuel, DraftKings, Barstool, all betting on the kids, not getting a dime of it. And I don't want to get the howls on, the fixing and the spreads and all this kind of stuff, but again, by 2033, $40 billion will be wagered on professional and collegiate sports. That's real money that somehow has got to be trickled down. But as a coach, will you or would you have been ever worried would that impact the outcome of a forget a football game, but you were a baseball pitcher. I mean, hey Jake, we're going to pay you $1,000 to walk this guy. I mean, how can it be governed?
To me, and right now, to be honest with you, I'm amazed that we don't see more, under the table money getting paid to certain athletes. But, to me, as an athlete, you're so competitive that you just want to win. But when you look at the money that it's generating, they're going to have to find a way, because if you don't, this is what would worry me as a coach, Vince. If it gets up to these numbers, which it will, and it may be more than that,
probably more,
you have got to find a way to control it and regulate it, because somebody's going to get smart enough to figure out a way, whether it's players, whether it's an entity outside of the players that has a connection with the players.
Right.
And the question I have is, could you have a player sponsored by Bally's or something without that causing a conflict, or a coach? But to me, I think that's where the university comes in, and that's where the regulation. So as a former athlete and as a coach, it's something that once you get more information on it, I think we'll have a better grasp on it. But as of right now, I think the competition level and guys that are trying to get drafted and guys that are trying to play professionally or guys that want to end up coaching, it's not worth the risk. But just like anything that blows up as quick as this is blowing up as we speak right now, there has to be regulations on it, and they've got to find a way to do that. But I don't trust the NCAA at all. I don't trust them at all.
I think basketball is probably a little more susceptible.
Yeah, it is.
Because one guy can change the outcome. I mean, I think football, being as big of a team sport, and I do agree with the competition. I'm going to speak out of both sides of my mouth. I don't really think – well, now you already have a wagering company sponsoring University of Colorado.
Yep.
So there's precedent. And that cash is going to either Colorado or IMG or Learfield or whoever holds those rights. So it is going to be fascinating to sort of see – kind of where this goes. But at a macro level, student athletes are truly now comprehending their power.
Yeah.
And to your point, the genie's out of the bottle, the house is out of the barn. So I guess we gotta do a little tip of the cap to basketball. What a crazy weekend last weekend! I think it set a record for more double-digit seeds beating single-digit seeds. What is that attributable to? Maybe the crowd energy's not there. Maybe it's a more equal playing field this year. Not many one and dones, and also like Oral Roberts had the same, or Loyola had the same preparation and practice as Virginia and Texas and Ohio State and all those kind of guys. And now it's going to be interesting to see. The ratings are fairly stable, a little soft, down 3 to 5%. But I know in the old days, and nobody would admit it, but they would grimace when a George Mason would make a run and knock out a blue blood, because those are the true eyeballs that would hone in. But I mean, insane basketball, insane upsets. Sweet 16 preview. I mean, this is going to be an anathema to my Auburn brethren, but I mean, I like Alabama. I like Nate Oates. I like the SEC. I like the scrappy USC team. I would love to see Mark Few finally get his national championship at Gonzaga, but I think we're going to see. And I love this Bayham kid. Yeah. Like how cool is that to be coaching your son and he's just draining these giant threes. So and I love what Greg Sankey has done. Even before that, Mike Slob, they made it a mission to make SEC basketball competitive. And I like, you've got the Auburns. We'll see what happens at LSU. You've got Nate Oates. You've got, Tennessee. You've got, obviously you've got Kentucky as a mainstay. But how do you see this weekend panning out? Because you are the soothsayer. I mean, you got a pretty high percentage.
Yeah.
So far.
Yeah, we're 70% of all our picks we've hit so far. So check us out at the J Boy Show.
Yeah, we're gonna have some more picks this weekend.
Oh
right?
yeah.
You won me some money during the Super Bowl. So I'm gonna
go with I try. I don't know a lot of things, but I do feel like we're good on this. But to quote the great prophet Futures, balling like it's March Madness, and that's what it's been. It's been crazy. To me, this has been the craziest tournament, Vince, that I have seen. I love it. I love the parity. I love watching a team like Loyola Chicago that went to the Final Four 2 years ago, build it back up and make another run. To me, that speaks to how quickly college basketball you're able, when we talk about the PR for Oral Roberts, Loyola Chicago is a great example. They're back. They look better than Illinois.
Sister
who
Jean.
is a one seed. It's Sister Jean. I think her prayers are going for like $2 million on Cameo right now, so check that out. But when I watch these games, and I think you talked about it, you hit it right on the head, it's an equal playing field because you're not having to travel. You're practicing typically at the same spot. Everybody is in really 4 to 6 different places, and that helps with preparation. As a coach, I would love that. I would love to be able to have consistency, because that's what you worry about with traveling and going on the road. It's, all right, we're at a new place. We used to tell our guys, don't get caught, spectating or city watching. We're on a mission here. We have a job to do, and now you can just do it. And you can see how relaxed the guys are, and the crowd energy. That's another thing. It's weird not seeing the bands there in the NCAA tournament. Singing the fight songs and going nuts.
We filmed a lot of TV about it, but I'm going to give you a hot take. And this is another time I got literally thrown out of the NCAA headquarters.
I love it. No white tees in the club, Vince.
You had no rednecks in the club either. I went to them and I said, look, let's make the Final Four the ultimate celebration of basketball. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, why can't we play the men's and the women's and the McDonald's All-American in the same city during the same week? Final Four for men's, alternate days, Final Four for women. You've got all this crowds. You've got this energy. You've got people that would go watch them. You've got McDonald's All-American. It typically is the convention of the National Association of Basketball Coaches. I would call it a tall person's convention, because you could sit in the lobby and all these really, really tall people would be coming through. Yeah. And they were like, well, we can't do that, and da-da-da-da-da. Of course, now, lo and behold, they're like, well, maybe we'll just consolidate them all together. And I think I took that idea in there maybe like a 05.
Yeah, Vinny Dama strikes again.
Vinny Dama strikes again with the entertainment and all that. And so I think the silver lining of it is that, it's fun to make the NCAA the piñata now. I don't think those guys and ladies have bad hearts. I know a lot of those championship coordinators. I think some of them do. I know some of them. I know some of them have bad hearts. But I think it's here's my advice to the NCAA: change is inevitable, Growth is optional. Choose wisely. So who makes it out of this weekend into the Final Four? I'm putting the J-Boy on the spot. Not the spread, just who you like. We'll talk about the spread later.
You gotta have Baylor and Gonzaga. Obviously, the way I see it, Alabama's playing so good right now. That Michigan matchup's going to be a big one.
Is that going to be a war?
I would give Michigan the advantage right now because they have a big man on the inside. I would say Baylor, Gonzaga, Michigan, and Loyola Chicago. I think they're going back.
That's a hot take.
I think they're going back.
I love that kid on the harmonica.
Oh, man, the one guy looks just like Farba from Super Troopers. He gives everybody hope.
Yeah, they said he's going to play basketball and then he's going to go work his shift at the 7-Eleven.
At Shenanigans.
Yeah. True story, trivia. My first Final Four was in the Superdome. I did a last-minute road trip. Was living in Birmingham. At lunch, the guy said, "Hey, let's go to the final game," and it was Michigan. It was the game.
Yeah, wow.
I was there when Chris Webber called the phantom timeout.
The worst timeout ever taken.
I mean, it was it was one of the first times they had played it in a Superdome type environment, and just amazing, palpable energy. And then 2002. I just moved to Atlanta. Didn't have a dime to my name. My dad said, "Hey, you think you can get us a couple tickets, go to the Final Four?" It was a special time, and then we win the Coke NCAA business in 2003. Huge, yeah. So it's it's a very special, emotional time for the year. But again, I think there's going to be a lot of positive fallout. Like I said, I know the pundits I talked to, the corporate sponsors, my friends in the television. Is it a course correction? Is it a forced course correction? Either way, it's going to be a course correction, and because it's interesting because ESPN has the rights to the women's March Madness, so you're going to have to get all the big dogs to the table. Yeah, you're going to have to get Disney, ABC, ESPN. You're going to have to get CBS and Viacom. You're going to have to get AT&T. People forget AT&T owns Turner now. There's some, and you got Coca-Cola, you got the Aflacs, you got the Capital Ones. We didn't even forget that Barkley and Samuel L. Jackson and Spike Lee. Kenny Smith. I mean, they're Greg Gumbel. All my friends, they're all getting paid a lot of money to be endorsers for this, and so I think it's going to be fascinating. I think we're going to be a part of that conversation. I love the athletes are going to be a part of the conversation. The hot take, Loyola, biting your tongue, calling Alabama in there. I mean, that's and we're going to unpack your picks later. But it's been a fascinating discussion. Build brand new, building your personal brand. J-Boy building the big brand, student athletes building the big brand is now hot on Amazon and social media. My partner in crime, Jake J-Boy Crane, and that's it for today's Meltdown. Thank you, Jake.
Anytime, and I'm telling you, go get the book right now. Just trust me, go get the book. It works. I'm walking testament to that.
That's it for this week's Meltdown.
You've just listened to the Meltdown. Remember to follow us on Twitter and Instagram @MeltATL and follow Vince @VinnyInc and on LinkedIn as Vince Thompson.